Here. Awesome. So we are into week two. Week two, we're going to be talking about the fundamentals of everything. I create a little agenda so you can so you can understand exactly what we're going to cover today. We're going to go over some fundamental rules of SEO-driven content marketing, things to abide by, not necessarily must-haves, but things that when you have them do help your effort. If there are things that you just can't do for whatever reason, it's totally fine. These are just guidelines that I've crafted based on my own work in SEO-driven content marketing. Then we're going to go through some headline formulas, so the way to craft really awesome headlines that convert, meaning you get really high click-through rates. When you start ranking them on Google, they have really high click-through rates as well. And it's just content that people want to actually click, but not clickbait. Everything but clickbait. Then we're going to go through some of the core types of content, and this is where I'm actually going to show you some of the content that you'll end up creating over time. We're going to talk about some of the content that you'll create that is focused around selling, content that's focused around ranking on Google, and content that is very SEO focused and helps you build links, which in turn, when you start to rank on Google, allows you to rank that much higher against your competitors and a lot faster. Then the final thing we're going to go through is some content formatting guidelines just for readability. So this is all the key things you should do to enhance readability, make it really, really easy for someone to skim through your article, as well as make them want to read it. So kicking off, some fundamental rules. I think I talked about consistency last week, and basically for you to create content on a consistent basis, a basis where your audience is going to expect it, a basis where Google is going to expect it, and they're going to come to your website on a regular basis that you've defined in order to find that new content, because it gets trained based on how you put out content. But consistency, however you define that and however you want to do that, is very, very key to this process. So if you decide, hey, my way of doing things is going to be, I'm going to put out an article every month because that's what I have the capacity to do, that's totally fine. But expect that your audience, as well as Google, is going to be trained around that particular timeline. So once you define what that is for you, based on your resources, based on how often you think you can come up with content, just be consistent with that timeline, however it is you want to set it out. And I say here that kind of directly affects ranking potential, because Google will look for content on a regular basis that you've defined after you have a few articles out there. So if you post one every month, they're going to come back every single month expecting new content. And when they start to not see that, they'll immediately start looking at ranking your site, going into checking for new content and then ranking your site on a much slower basis. So what we're doing to keep it consistent is keeping Google on their toes, making sure that you're ranking as fast as possible, and directly for your audience is making sure that they get content on a schedule that they understand. So there's one really awesome newsletter that I always expect every single, I think it's almost every single day now, and it's Hiten Shah's, I think it's like a SaaS roundup around software marketing and content marketing and things. Absolutely love it. And on days when I don't get it on time, I actually get a bit angry. But it's just because he's trained me to understand that it's going to come on a regular basis. And when I see it not come, I get a bit upset. Not so much, directly at him, but I notice it missing. So you don't want that to happen to your audience, because obviously it decreases engagement as well. So always focus on building some type of consistency there, just as you would any other aspect of your business. One other very key element is always deliver value. So we're going to go through the 3 types of content that you'll be creating, and you'll find that the most common theme throughout is that you do need to be delivering value, however that value comes, whether it is in teaching something, whether it is in selling something that will solve a problem for them, whether it is just delivering some type of knowledge or strategic value. Always focus on delivering value first. Everything else can come after that point. And one key, this is the one thing that I would say is more so of a rule you shouldn't break, much more so than just a small guideline. Avoid content that is not evergreen. What that means is if you're going to create an article around some particular software security process, make sure that that same guide is effective and can be used over the next 2, 3, 4 years. Because what happens is as it becomes outdated, the user experience becomes degraded because they then hit that article realizing that's not the right thing after a few seconds and leaving your website. So what that looks like for your own audience is it's a bad user experience. And that translates just as easily over to Google, where they're going to see a whole bunch of people clicking on a search result, hitting a page, leaving after a few seconds, and they're going to say, what the hell? That must have been an awful user experience. This guy shouldn't be on the first page, or this guy shouldn't be in position 1. And you'll see the knockdown from page 1 to page 2, page 3, page 4 extremely quickly. So avoid non-evergreen content where you can. Obviously, that can't always apply. You do have to have things like support materials and manuals and things, depending on what market you're in. But avoid it where you can in the content that you create. And the last thing, which is kind of a summation of a lot of this, is teach first, sell second. So you'll notice with a lot of the content that I go through later today, in actually just 20 minutes or so, focus on delivering value in your articles versus trying to sell them on your product. The product sales aspect and conversion to leads aspect, we will go through, and it will happen. But if you try and sell someone right at the start of your article, the immediate reaction is going to be, I don't want to be sold. Why would I read this article? I'm going to leave. And again, you hit that same loop where they leave the site very quickly. Google picks up on that and says, hey, what the hell? That's a bad user experience. And, it all leads to a bad road. And the last kind of thing I'll leave you with here with these rules and with these guidelines is trust that the system works. It's not some kind of like crackpot idea that I just thought up while I was on LSD or anything like that. It's something that has been crafted over time, and is a lot of the stuff that's in here is taken from some of the biggest marketers in the world who drive hundreds of thousands, millions of unique visitors, and in return, millions of dollars in revenue as a result of that. A lot of the principles that are in here are fundamentals from HubSpot, which is one of the fastest growing SaaS companies, as well as from marketers like Neil Patel and Brian Dean, who are both very big experts in the content marketing and in the SEO space. So trust that the system works, but the reason why I'm here is I'm here to answer your questions and help you understand and help you fundamentally understand that the system works. So, if you have a question, don't just, let it go in your head and fester and not follow the system because of that. Bring it up, talk to me about it. We're going to figure out a way to help you logically understand why it makes sense to go this way versus that way. And that way, you'll be on a path to success. So this is kind of an outline of basically what we're going to cover. This is essentially the very high level structure of a piece of content. If you look at it as if it was on a web page, the call to action at the top here would be your navigation bar. Call to action on the side here would be the sidebar of the article. Call to action at the bottom would be, and we'll actually go through what these are in more detail next week, but call to action at the bottom would be something like a banner ad saying, hey, click here to get this free guide. But the core of it is the content and the headline. And we're going to go through these two aspects, the headline and the core content, and basically the way that you format that for ideal readability and also to get the most people into that piece of content as possible. So first things first, the perfect headline. This is actually something that was taught to me by Neil Patel and a few other guys who have done a lot of research across thousands and thousands of articles to figure out exactly what worked best in their headlines to drive clicks from their own list, from ads, from search rankings, and otherwise. So what I've compiled here are, I believe it's 5 key tips to help you craft really awesome headlines. And when I implemented a lot of these into our own site, there's a very significant jump in click-through rate and everything that happens across the board because it just sounds so much more appealing than, one of the articles that we used to have was, it was it was just something like a guide to mobile design with one of my clients. Like that's what we used to have before, and I implemented a few of these and it eventually became the definitive guide to mobile design, 16 tips to help you crush it or crush your competitors. And obviously that's a much nicer read headline than a guide to mobile design. So a couple quick things that I want to go through here that you should have in your headline if you can put it in there. Numbers. Any type of numbers, ideally odd numbers, work best and increase click-through rate from emails as well as from search. So a lot of these tend to be list-based posts, but if you don't necessarily have a list post, it's just a handful of strategies that you can use. Try and put a number to it, even if that number is not at the beginning of the headline. What it does is it obviously increases click-through rate. The odd numbers, for some reason, stand out to people, and it almost acts as if it was clickbait. And the result of that is it's a really high click-through rate, whether it's from Facebook ads, whether it's from search or social shares. Wherever you put it, it has a really, really high click-through rate. And some of the numbers from our site are from Google. We had an article ranking on the bottom of the first page. It was getting us about 23 unique visitors every single week because obviously being at the bottom of the first page doesn't get a lot of traffic. When we modified our headline to include an odd number and also have some of the other elements in here, but more specifically, the big change was adding a number to the front of it and making it more like a list post. We almost immediately, within about 2 weeks, jumped up to position number 3, where instead of 26 visitors per week, we're now getting over 100 visitors every single week. And they're all very high quality visitors looking for sales funnels, which is the core agency that we have. So it can make a very big impact, such a small thing. Pop-ups, too many pop-ups. There we go. The second thing is power and emotion words. If you Google for power and emotion words, there's massive lists of them put together by guys sites like Buffer and CoSchedule. But essentially, what these are, they're words that drive that elicit some type of emotion or some type of feeling within that person. So a power word could be effective. So it might be something like 4 effective sales funnels that you can steal today, where the emotion word is steal, because it drives a little bit of emotion there. Another example could just be here's, and I think I showed this last time, the Dr. Axe post. It could be something like 21 useful, and useful being the power word there, useful coconut oil benefits that can affect your daily life. So there's words that will elicit some type of emotion and feeling, and there's massive lists of them out there, and I will have a link to one of these lists in the membership site when this goes live. It's like 500 plus words deep, but in reality you can probably think of a handful that makes sense in this case. It doesn't matter if you have to repeat it a bunch of times. If you go through some of our client sites, we repeat effective an unbelievable amount of times. Almost every other article uses effective in the headline, and it is effective. So it works. Another one here, special characters. So special characters definitely stand out. And what a special character is it's anything like a bracket or a star or an and symbol, anything along those lines that drives attention and is kind of odd to see in a headline. Typically it works really well. So the way that this is used is if you have a headline like 4 effective sales funnels, in brackets you could put number 2 is absolutely amazing, or number 2 is completely amazing. It's just something that drives a little bit of attention, and having it in that bracket there is like, hey, PS, here's another little tidbit for you. Makes a little bit of a personal connection if you read it like that, if you read it in that way, if that is the way that you use it. And the last one here is keep your headlines to 6 words or less, ideally under 70 characters. So when Google indexes your content, and even when you put it into Twitter or Facebook, there's only a certain number of characters that'll show up in the Facebook preview as well as in Google's actual search results. Keeping the number of characters under 70 allows you to have your full headline in that search result. In most cases, that ends up being under 6 words or 6 words. And, it's not a hard and fast rule, but if you try and follow this more to a T between 50 and 70 characters, you'll have better results overall. Your headline won't get cut off in almost any medium out there, whether it is search or whether it's social. So try and stick to this rule more so than any of the other ones, because it's just going to allow you to have your full kind of clickbait headline, or however you want to structure that, your particular headline that's really going to drive those clicks. It's going to be much more effective that way. Some tools that can help you out with this stuff, because obviously there's a lot there, and you often don't see it when you're crafting your content and creating your headlines. 2 really awesome tools, YoRocket.com, created by Brian Dean over at Backlinko. It's a tool that plugs directly into your WordPress site, and on your backend, when you're editing content, it'll show on the right-hand side there. It'll give you a score out of 100, and it'll tell you what particular elements are missing. It'll say, hey, you don't use numbers in your headline, or hey, you're not using special characters, or your headline length is too long, or it's too short. It'll give you all that information, and it even has some information there about how to fix that. So, it's I think it's $29 a month. So if you're going to be creating a lot of content, the plan is to really scale this up. I'd totally go that route. It is extremely useful, even for optimization. So if you have a lot of content already, install it, go in there and optimize a lot of the stuff that you have. The other tool that's completely free, coschedule.com/headline analyzer. And again, these links will be in the membership site, but CoSchedule has a free tool that analyzes your headline and analyzes it for the same factors. Are you using power words? Are you using emotion words? Are you using special characters? Is your headline long enough or short enough? It'll go through all that information and really just spit out, here's exactly what's what, and it'll tell you where to fix it as well. So that was quite a bit of content, quite a bit of information there. If you have any questions, pop them in the chat or unmute yourself. And I know, Howard, you dropped this one a bit earlier. My main product is how to be secure on the computer. I tend to mention or discuss the latest hacker attack. Is this to be avoided? No, because discussing the latest hacker attack, it's not necessarily selling. In that case, you're informing. You are delivering value there. You're saying, hey, here's the latest hacker attack that you might not be protecting yourself from. What I would consider selling that you want to try to avoid there is directly saying, well, here's the latest hacker attack, and you should buy my software in order to fix it. That's okay. That's where it's a bit too direct. And if you go to any of those like VPN type sites, they do that really often.
Right.
They talk about, hey, Netflix just got banned in the UK, and you know what? For $9 you can fix it right here. That's the stuff you want to avoid at all costs, unless it is on your sales page. And when we go through the types of content, that'll explain it that even bit deeper of where to avoid doing that, where you can do that.
Yeah, that was the question I had about that, was really based on one of the things that I think shows a richness and a level of expertise, as well as all of the all testimonials and stuff like that. But the level of expertise is to be able to say, yeah, you may have only just heard about this, and that's why this is how you've come to the search. But here's the content from the last 3 years that details the other attacks that have come up. So I just wanted to make sure that we weren't talking about that. So thank you.
Totally. That makes total sense. I mean, in the case that you mentioned there, that's totally makes sense. You are delivering a good amount of value there, and it makes total sense to keep doing. Any other questions, or should we move into types of content?
On slide 5 there.
Yeah.
Color one where you're showing. Yeah. Is this the layout for every page on your WordPress type of thing? Should follow something like this?
It will, for the most part. If you just install the basic version of WordPress and go to the blog section, it'll follow something along these lines. This and the call to action at the bottom, the call to action at the top, you may not necessarily have that based on whether you have a navigation system or like a menu at the top, or however you have that set up. This is more so just an example. With a lot of blogs you may come across these days, they don't have a sidebar. In some cases, it works perfectly fine for them. In the case of our blog, when we'll actually take a look at my blog in a second. In my case, I have the sidebar. I have all of these elements because I'm focused more so on conversion than anything else.
Okay.
Yeah. So you may have this stuff, you may not have this stuff, but the one thing you will have is inevitably you have a headline just above your content, and then you have your core content. Any article page is going to look exactly like that with these two elements.
Okay.
Yeah. Any other questions, or should we move over to types of content? Awesome. So we'll dive right into types of content. So there's three core types of content, as I mentioned. There's content that ranks, and that's going to be about 50% of the focus in this program. So there's content that ranks on Google or Bing or Yahoo, content that's made to drive SEO value. Then there's content that links, and what that means is over the course of time and with the process of SEO, you may have heard a lot of talk about backlinks. And what backlinks really are, they're just links or mentions from other websites linked out to your piece of content, whether it's an article or whatever else, where they're talking about it and they're mentioning, hey, here's another piece of reading you might want to take a look at. In our case, we're going to be creating some of that content that is focused around linking because it will help with all of your SEO related stuff, meaning it's going to allow you to rank a lot faster on Google because you're basically showing, hey, a lot of people are linking to me, I'm a really credible source. And it's also content that allows you to create really awesome relationships because you're going out there and mentioning other folks in your area who might be influencers. There might be people who have websites and have blogs and have the ability to write about your stuff. We'll go a bit deeper into each one of them, but high level, we're going to be focusing about 40%, 45% of our time on this. And I have one particular type of piece of content that you'll be able to create next week that is extremely awesome at this and takes very, very, very little time. It's only about 700 words of content you'll actually have to write, and the rest of it is just curating really awesome content from the web. The last piece of content that you'll be creating, or you may already have, is content that sells. Really what this is like your homepage, your service pages where it really is all about your service, what you're offering, your product, whatever the case there. It's only going to be about 5% of our focus. And the only real focus that we're going to be looking at is around if someone comes to that page and they don't take any action, how can we capture some information from them to pull them into some type of conversion system? And we're going to go through that. I believe it's week 7 when we go through how to make your website convert. So content that ranks. Basically, this is going to be the long form type of content, what most people call skyscraper content, that is aimed at ranking on very specific keywords by being the best content for that keyword. So if someone's searching coconut oil, like with the Dr. Axe example, they have the best piece of content that talks about coconut oil and its benefits. It's really long form. It's very actionable information, has a lot of value in there by teaching people the benefits of coconut oil. And as a nice plus for them, it can link out to a lot of different products, which means there is a revenue aspect tied to it. Most of this content in this category is going to be evergreen content that you'll create, and it teaches or delivers some type of value that is a reason for someone to read it. And an example of that, let me see if I can do a bit of a quick screen change here. Can everybody see my browser now? Just type yes in the chat or unmute yourself and say yeah. Yep, awesome. So this is my blog, and this is an example of content that ranks. For us, it's a really, 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 really long form article around content marketing tips. And I stress really because this is over 10,000 words, which you don't have to do. Over time, this thing has just become a monster. It started off at 3,000 words, but over time we kept adding and adding and adding and adding. And now this is a type of content for us that ranks. Basically, it's just focused on trying to rank for the keyword content marketing tips, as you can probably see from the URL here. And as a result of all the other SEO things that we do and driving promotion, eventually this will rank, and it's already ranking at the bottom of the first page as of today. So this is an example of content that ranks. The next one we'll go through is content that links. And I'm just going to show you on my browser first before we go back to the slide deck. But content that links typically is something like this. And this is our definitive guide to content marketing. Really what it is, and this is what I'm going to show you how to create next week, is a very, very short form article that's lengthened through curating content. So we don't really create a lot of our own content in this article. Our own content is pretty much this top piece here. These couple sections here are the only pieces of content that we created. Everything else is about linking out to really qualified, awesome sources of information that we've curated on behalf of someone reading the article. So we link out over here to something from Content Marketing Institute about content marketing stats. Down here, we have our table of contents where we have a whole bunch of links to the different sections that we're talking about. So fundamentals, how to craft a strategy, how to create your content, how to generate leads from your content, getting traffic in there, outsourcing, toolkits, a whole bunch of different sections here. But each section is just a headline, a couple paragraphs, and here's a bunch of really awesome content. And this is the type of content that's made to link. So the reason why we link out to all these folks is that I then get to mention all these folks here and get in contact with them and say, hey, I included you in my article. Do you want to take a look? And inevitably what happens is they say yes. We've actually never had anyone say no. We send them over the link, and the next thing that they do is they either share it or they just reply back and say awesome. But about 10% of the time they'll share it, and eventually they'll end up linking to us as well. And we had a massive guy with like 26,000 followers share this article 2-3 days ago. And it got like over 150 retweets on Twitter. It was awesome. And he just, off the bat, he's just like, I got the link, loved it, I shared it, here you go. Nice and simple. But that's what this type of content is made for. And this is a good example of what that looks like. Let me switch back over here. So as I mentioned, it's made for promotion, and the core focus of this type of content, and the reason why we're going to talk about it next week, because I do want everybody to create one of these pieces of content, is because it's great for building a relationship. And building a relationship in your market, within the influencers that you have available, means you're building a network of folks who can share your content, can link to your content, and will be an ongoing source of organic promotion. So over time, you may not have to spend as much time promoting your content. You just have to create some really awesome stuff, and it'll naturally get shared. Through content like this, we've been linked to some really awesome folks like Sujin Patel, who is more of an upcoming marketer in the space, but he has a great list of folks, and they all love content marketing based content. As well as a whole bunch of other people as in relation to that. And typically this content is over about 1,500 words. So the article that you saw within all the content that we created, and then all the links and everything else, it adds up to about 1,700 words. And it really only took us about 2 hours to pull together. So really, really quick, really, really easily. We just did it over a weekend, and it's kind of done and done. The last type of content is content that sells. And the reason why we're not going to focus on this very much is because chances are you already have these pages ready to go. And if you don't, this is a lot more copywriting than it is creating content. Often what we're talking about in this case is a homepage or a service page or a sales page. Essentially, it's just a page or an article that's crafted to make a specific offer and sell someone. And it's usually linked to some type of call to action to sell. I should have just showed it to you instead of switching back and forth, but let me know when you can see this. And this is an example of one of these types of content that sells. This is one of our clients, and their main offer here is a white label app building platform. and basically a bunch of their content links out to this thing. And this entire page is just crafted specifically to get someone to fill out this little form at the bottom here. So that's really all it is. Chances are you already have these pages, which is why I'm kind of glossing over it. It's just a service page. You don't really have too much content in here. There's maybe 500-600 words, but it's kind of up to you on just how you want to craft that. If you do need help in any of that realm, we're going to go through this a little bit when we get to converting content. But if you want to bring this up in one of your one-on-one calls, and you want some help with that, then we can look at that. But otherwise, any questions at this stage around the types of content that you can create?
Jamil, you said frequency. So the more frequency, I guess I should ask this in a second, but the more frequent that you post something, then Google looks at for more frequently. Is there an optimal amount of that you should be pushing content out there on a monthly basis or weekly basis to have the fastest ranking type of thing? Is there a number for that type of thing?
Yeah, it's funny that you mentioned that. So I've been doing a lot of research on that because I had a particular idea of what that looked like. And over time, I've found that different people are saying different timelines. My only real recommendation that I can make there is, ideal case, you're posting at least twice every week. That's not a hard and fast rule though, because not everybody can create content at that rate. Basically what you do is, if you can create content more infrequently, so maybe once a month, maybe once a week, you should spend a little bit more time promoting that content, if you're going to leave that much of a gap in between. And promoting that content does make up some grounds there if you can't post content on a regular basis. So with our blog, we post on a weekly basis, and the way that I make up for it is I do a lot of content promotion. With some of our clients, they post 3 to 4 times a week. So the content promotion doesn't have to be as heavy. It just accelerates it for them. So there's not an extremely definitive answer to that, but the data-backed answer is 3 to 4 times a week. The answer that I've seen based on some of the larger marketers in the space and their numbers, because I've seen a lot of their Google Analytics dashboards, is once a week is perfectly fine. Once a month is probably a bit too infrequent, but you can make up for it with a lot of content promotion. So I'm sorry that's not an entirely definitive answer, but that's about as good as I can give, because they're a real.
That's a pretty good answer. Yeah.
Awesome. Any other questions? All right, we'll jump into the next section. If I did miss a question, just pop it in the chat and I'll get to it. So last up, content formatting. So as I mentioned a bit earlier, readability is very key with your content, because obviously if someone doesn't want to read it, they're not going to spend a lot of time on your blog or on your article page. And the result of that is Google's going to look at that and they're going to say, hey, if this article is 20,000 words, people are only spending 30 seconds on it, it's obviously not that good. So as a result of that, I'm not going to let you rank. Readability, it really doesn't it doesn't just impact your audience or anything like that. It can also impact your ability to rank. So these are a few tips specifically to help your articles become much more readable and easier for someone to skim, because a lot of people do load up articles, they skim to the bottom. If it looks like something that's readable and they want to spend some time reading, then they'll go back up to the top and continue. But you basically have to craft your content to fit for both situations, guys who want to skim versus guys who will actually spend the time reading. So one of the first elements there is being able to break up your content with headlines and subheadlines. And you want to do that very often. So typically every 200 to 300 words. Now, what this looks like is, if you have an article that breaks down maybe 4 strategies to do whatever it is, maybe 4 strategies to make yourself a lot more healthy. And what you want to do in terms of headlines and subheadlines is your strategy, the title of that strategy. Number 1, exercise regularly. That'll be your headline. Your headline would break down, how to do that. So, make sure that you plan out your exercises at the beginning of every week. That way you're not going to miss them. Plan out what you're going to do in that 30 or 40-minute exercise session. And, each of those is going to be their own subheadline where you then explain more information below. Images are also a great way to break up content when a section just gets too long. So if you have a section, maybe it is about planning out your fitness routine, and you go on this big rant about, how you have to make sure that you plan it out in your schedule. You have to make sure you keep it accountable. All these elements here, and it ends up being this, 500, 600 word section, just, kind of ranting about it. That's perfectly fine. But what you want to do in order to make it a little bit more readable, break it up with an image. Images are absolutely awesome for this, but don't go too heavy. And I'll kind of explain why later. It pretty much relates to the whole mobile usability side of things. But don't put them too often. 300 to 500 words is best. So that means, an article like that content marketing tips that I showed you, it's about 10,000 words. We do have about 20 images in that article, but they've all been formatted and resized and things. And they are in key positions to directly highlight specific pieces of information. So don't just put an image for image sakes. If it doesn't make any sense at all, leave it out. But if you can, put it in, even if it's just something like a kind of a funny meme, but as long as it can drive home your point, it makes total sense. Font size, this is directly related to readability. Don't put anything below 16 pixels, and you can adjust this in your WordPress settings. But if you look at a site and the text is too small, which I very often do because I look at a lot of blogs, people will actually get upset with you when you start to scale and you have thousands of people hitting your blog. You will have people commenting and saying, like, what the hell? I can't read this and I have glasses on, and people get really upset. It's a really weird thing, but people will get upset about it. So take a look at your WordPress settings or whatever backend you use. 16 pixels should be minimum. That's what we do on our blog. We do 16. 18 is ideal. And if you go with the format of a blog that looks like this but without a sidebar, you can really get away with a very large font size, and it looks absolutely amazing. Makes it really, really easy to read your content and really, really easy to skim. But it's really just about making it easy on the eyes, because you're going to be creating 2,000-3,000 word articles. It takes 5, 10, 20 minutes to read. So you want to assume that their eyes might get tired, and if they get tired, they're going to immediately leave that page. So mobile is pretty much the reason why you're doing a lot of this stuff. Mobile is like 80% of most people's traffic. On our blog, mobile accounts for 75% of all of our traffic, which means that all of our pages need to be really well mobile optimized. But we also need to look at a few other factors. So spacing on mobile is very important, making sure that you do have smaller paragraphs, you do have a lot of headlines, you do have images, everything that breaks up content and makes it really easy to keep scrolling. You also need to look at page size, and these are some of the more technical aspects that may make sense for us to talk in a one-on-one call if you think you have issues with this. But I did mention a tool in the next slide that'll help you identify whether you do have an issue with this. But page size is a key thing, because on mobile, especially here in Canada, 1 gigabyte of data costs, I don't know, it's something like $25, $30. It's something absolutely ridiculous. But what that means is for most blogs, I can only read about 40 to 60 pages before I hit a gig worth of data. So that's almost like $1 for me to read each page, which is kind of insane. And when you look at your own audience, that's essentially what you're doing to them if you don't have a decently optimized page. Is you're making them pay a lot of money in data just because you didn't want to spend the 15 seconds or 20 seconds to get your page optimized. And that also affects a lot of other things like load time and all these other factors which just deal with a really bad user experience. And I'm sure you've had this exact experience where you go to a website, it takes 20, 30 seconds to load, and you're on mobile and you're just, you're absolutely biting your nails. Like, what the hell is going on with this website? It's one of the worst things that you can do for mobile user experience. And this directly relates to more people that will, click on your link, start loading your website, 5 seconds later, get really frustrated that it hasn't loaded yet, and leave. And you might not see it on your analytics, but Google will be able to see that data and say, hey, this is a pretty bad user experience if no one's being able to load your site. And as a result of that, they'll also, not allow you to rank. I know I mentioned that a lot of times today. There's just a lot of things that Google really hates that do negatively affect your ability to rank. But again, if you don't think that your site is very mobile friendly, definitely get in touch. I've done a lot of optimization in this realm, and we can work one-on-one to help you get that sorted out. But easy way to do it, open up your browser on your desktop, type in whatever page on your website, and resize that browser to be as thin as it can be. And if it still looks pretty decent, then you have a pretty good page. So don't worry too much about that if it looks totally fine there. One tool that'll help you understand whether you have a load time or page size issue is tools.pingdom.com. And again, this link will be in the membership site. But tools.pingdom.com, what it does is actually I can show you here. Let me copy this URL. So tools.pingdom.com is just a little website that allows you to pop in a URL and test the load time, the load size, all these other data points about your website. So for example, if we put our content marketing tips article in here, I'm sure there's actually gonna have a pretty bad score because I haven't optimized the new images yet. Yeah, exactly what I thought. So this page is way too big. Over 10 megabytes is way too big. But if you have something that's between 2 and 3 megabytes, that's about as good as you're going to get on most websites, just because things like WordPress have a lot of things that load there. But in our case, load time is not awful, but the page size is ridiculous. That's totally my fault. But if you see these numbers and this page size is above 3 or the load time is above 4 or 5, definitely get in touch with me and I can help you try and fix that. There are some really quick fixes with this. This is literally just me not taking 2 minutes to optimize this page. But if we look at the content marketing article that we just put out, it's significantly tinier because it has very, very little in terms of images. And as a result of that, 2.3 megabytes. So that's literally just related to images. Again, if you think you have an issue with that, get in touch. It's important to bring it up and it's important to address it because it will affect you later on down the game. So before we talk about action items, are there any other questions about that? Because that was quite a bit of stuff to kind of go over there around formatting.
Sure. Font. What about font type?
Font type
fonts
doesn't really matter too much. My rule of thumb, because I really don't like I don't like fonts like Times New Roman. I hate the old school look of it. I tend to go with sans serif fonts, which means fonts without the little accents at the end of the letter. It's really up to your preference. Don't choose anything that is hard to read. So some folks I know choose like cursive looking letters. That's just horrible. Most folks under like 18 or 20 won't be able to read it. And those above 50 will also kind of struggle to read it because they're just not meant to be used on digital very much. So try and keep it, something like this. This is a sans serif font. It's nice. It's clean. If you can throw your article around to friends and family, just ask them, hey, is this easy to read? If not, just let me know, and then you can make some changes there. Any other questions there? All right, so some action items today. These action items are really only going to be directly applicable if you have a website with some content on it right now, whether it is one article or maybe you have 100 articles on there. But if you have a website regardless, even if you just have a homepage there, at least do the pingdom test to make sure that you're in good shape. But main action items here are just going to be, take a look at any content that you have that exists right now. Make a list of content where you don't use some or all of the headline tips that I mentioned, and make a list of any content that may be able to use some reformatting, and just start taking action. Start applying some of these action, or some of these methodologies into your headlines, into the way you format content, into your website if you have to optimize it. But it'll get you a bit more familiar with things as we go to creating content, which is going to be next week. We're going to start touching on that. And the last thing would be, if you haven't, I believe there's one or two folks who haven't, please fill out those business intelligence survey and the other survey from last week. It's in the membership site. The reason why I need that done is for next week, I actually want to build your personal 90-day strategy for every single one of you, so that we can shortcut some of the technicalities involved that I do need to create videos for behind the scenes for later on. And I want to help you bridge that gap. So if you haven't filled it out yet, all that means is I can't create your 90-day strategy because I really have to understand who your customer is in order to do the research. So if you haven't, please do that. Otherwise, does anyone have any questions around any of this or anything in general?
Hey, Jamil, you were talking about booking a call sometime between the 2nd and 3rd.
Yeah.
If we have or once we have the surveys filled out, would that be a good time to book the call, so that way we can get whatever else we need set and prepped? Or
yeah, that would be good.
Okay, so this coming week is a good time, or from now until the next session would be a good time?
Yeah, before the end of next week would be a good time.
Okay.
If it really has to be, the beginning of the next week after, really what I'm doing on those calls, because I've only talked to a few of you about it, is I'm really confirming my understanding of what you put into the surveys, and also just, helping you answer any questions that you have to this point in time. But what that allows me to do is allows me to know exactly what to research for when I craft your 90-day strategy. If you answered with a lot of detail, I know some of you went and wrote like books for me, which I absolutely love. But if you have that level of detail in there, I can totally work based on that. Really, that call is kind of just it's a personal one-to-one check-in more so than anything. And if you do book it next week or the week after, that's perfectly fine too. All that means is we'll also be able to go over your 90-day strategy, or we'll get to talk about some more advanced stuff, which is great. So yeah, definitely, if you haven't yet, book that call. End of next week would be perfect, or before the end of next week would be perfect. Or if not, early the week after, because we're going to get into content creation very soon.
Okay, cool. Thanks.
Any other questions? Awesome. So I'm probably going to get this up and on the membership site in the next 30 minutes or so. I'm going to be jumping on a call for a meeting soon after this. So if I don't get it up in the next 30 minutes, it'll probably be about another hour, but it will be up tonight, as well as all the links and everything else. And again, if you haven't booked that call, book it. We can talk. And otherwise, you guys all have a really awesome weekend. And we'll talk again on Tuesday. Thanks for all coming out. And have an absolutely awesome weekend.